everyone for another episode of The Doctor Will See You Now. A very warm welcome if you are a returning viewer or if it's the first time that you have stumbled across these consultations. And might I say, if it's your first time, I think you're in for quite a delicious treat. Ever so often, it is that I get to interview an author who I may have met before, we may have spoken before, but this session is, well, it's new, it's lovely, an author new to me, and I'm ashamed to say I have never read any of this author's work before. But as often happens when it's a new author and you realise I have a back catalogue to get hold of now, which is wonderful. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Jack Jordan into the session. Jack, how are you?
I'm really good. Thank you so much for having me. It's really lovely to meet you.
It is a total pleasure. Before we came on air, you said that you are in the middle of your book tour at the moment. Is that so?
Yes. So yeah, I just arrived in Sheffield about half an hour ago. So I quickly ate a sandwich, put the kettle on and made a coffee. And now, yeah, I'm talking to you. But yeah, so I live in Brighton, but I had a launch in Brighton on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
Then Thursday I was in Colchester, where I'm originally from. Then Friday I was driving around Sussex signing books. Saturday went through London signing books. Yesterday was more local ones. And then today it's Sheffield. And then the rest of the week tomorrow so Sheffield Libraries at 12. Then it goes on to Waterstones Nottingham in the evening. Then York Libraries the next day at lunchtime. And then finishing off with Waterstones Harrogate. And they are with Russ Thomas.
How wonderful. How wonderful. Do you know the excitement of this kind of, this series of events? It does remind me of, when a new babe comes into the world, and you just want to show off. And of course, we're going to get into the notion of what would a parent be willing to do with your book. We are here to talk about the fabulous Do No Harm. And I'm going to come back a little later on and ask you about this cover because it is spectacular. Let's just have a wee look. I don't know if I put my hand in here. There's a little, sit there. Yeah. Anyway, enough of this, and let's get down first of all to finding out a little bit more about you. Jack, your name was familiar, but as I say, I'd never got into your work before, and I know so little about that trajectory. So I wonder if you could set us off by saying, here we are, publication of a book, it's out there, but how long did it take you to get to this point?
Really good question. So I have been writing for 12 years and I've been published for 7. And so I started writing at the age of 17 when I had agoraphobia and I was stuck in the house for a year. And I'd always loved reading and writing, but I'd never really made that as a child, but I'd never really made that correlation between my love of writing and reading and the books on the shelf and that being a job opportunity. So I don't know whether that's because I'm from a working class background or because just the way society looks at creative pursuits and whether we take it seriously enough or we're allowed to. So yeah, but during this year of isolation, I returned to it. Because with agoraphobia comes insomnia because you're not doing much. So I was about 5 a.m. typing away on my BlackBerry, if you remember those.
Oh gosh,
writing a short story to pass the time. And then the next day I thought, well, I haven't got anything to do. I'll just write a little bit more. And it carried on like that until 6 months later, I'd written 100,000 words. And I just knew by the end of that writing was what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I then, for the next 3 years, wrote 3 more books and tried to get an agent, but didn't get anywhere, which is a lot of people's story. But I'm quite impatient. So I thought, okay, well, if I can't get in that way, I'll find another way in. And this was around 2014, 2015, when the self-publishing boom was happening. So I self-published my debut novel, which was actually my 5th book, in 2015, and that's called Anything for Her, followed by my 2nd book, My Girl, that was published in 2016. And luckily, they did really well. They sold 100,000 copies. So with that success, I was then approached by a publisher. So I had to scramble around to find an agent to broker it and ended up going with a different publisher. But that's how I got into traditional publishing and published 3 more books, A Woman Scorned, which is an ebook novella, and then Before Horizon Night by Night, which are my traditional paperbacks. And then in 2020, 10 years after I started, I found myself at a bit of a crossroads in my career. I'd parted ways with my publisher and I parted ways with my agent. It was as if I was starting all over again.
Yeah.
And then the lockdowns happened because of coronavirus. So I was stuck in the house all over again. It was this real sense of deja vu because I started writing 10 years before, locked inside my house. And then here I am again, starting afresh, locked inside my house. So I did the only thing I knew what to do, and that was to write. And I wrote Do No Harm. And then everything I've ever dreamed of was waiting around the corner for me. I signed with my dream agent, Madeline Milburn, and signed with Simon and Schuster for a 2-book deal at auction. It was all, and it's just been a dream ever since.
I did thank you for sharing, that journey. The idea of out of, a difficult situation, of, feeling that I can't be out there in the world. I can't, but you took that and you made something that sent your life in a very different trajectory. Then again, difficulties come along. It's not happening as you think it might. COVID, arrives, and once more, you take that kind of difficult situation. I'm really, I'm really impressed by, that desire of I won't give in.
Totally. I think with with publishing and being a writer, rejection is part of the career. You're going to get rejection whatever point you're at. If you're successful, you're still going to be getting rejection, whether it's from not getting in the supermarket you wanted, or not getting a translation deal you wanted, or there's rejection baked into the DNA of publishing.
Yeah.
So I think it depends how the writer takes that rejection. So you can either, my opinion is, you can take it with a positive reinforcement or a negative reinforcement. You can either, with a negative reinforcement, let it devour you and stop you in your tracks and not let you go any further, or you can use it as fuel to power you forward. So I always think, well, I'll prove you wrong, and and it kind of sets the fire going.
It reminded me a little bit of romance, how, sometimes, again, the idea of rejection, and instead of thinking, what's wrong with me, the sense of, well, this wasn't meant to be. I'm just going to keep going and find out where I am meant to be. And by the sound of it, Jack, the notion of, a 2-book deal with Simon and Schuster is a fine place to be. But I would say as well in that, you established yourself, self-publishing.
Yeah.
So having, those different sides of, of book production, you're very much aware of it. Do you feel that they are very different beasts?
That's a really good question. And you're so right. So I came into traditional publishing with a lot of knowledge, because when you self-publish, I think there's again, different degrees of how you self-publish. So I treated mine like a business. So I got a loan out, my first ever loan, which was terrifying. Invested in it like a business. I was a project manager, accountant, marketeer. I researched the industry. I was emulating what the big publishers are doing for their books, but on a different scale. And yeah, researching the market, building up connections with book bloggers and reviewers. So it was a 2 years of heavy investment of time, money, and energy. But I learned so much in that process. So when I went into traditional publishing, I still had so much more to learn, but I went in with, I think, a lot more knowledge than perhaps a debut author might. So that was a real gift on my side. And I think they are definitely different beasts. So with, I found with self-publishing, you have a lot of control. You're making executive decisions. And then, but when you go to traditional publishing, a lot of the time, as soon as you sign that contract, you're often handing over a lot of your power and ability to decide and make decisions to other people. And I think and sometimes that can work well and sometimes it can't. So with my experiences, I've had different publishers, different agents. Sometimes it doesn't work. And then other times with Simon and Schuster, they're the best team I've ever met in publishing. I call them the dream team. They're absolutely phenomenal because we work collaboratively. They use my strengths, I use their strengths. It's just this level playing field of ideas and passion and excitement. And it works so well. And I think sometimes, if you come in from a self-publishing background with a lot of knowledge, sometimes it can be intimidating. Or with a previous publisher, I was often asked, well, what would you do, Jack? And I'm thinking, you shouldn't be asking me.
It's not my job, is it?
So I think there's different experiences throughout each kind of stage in this journey. But I think if you want it enough, and you take the knocks and use that as fuel instead of letting it destroy you. I think, I mean, don't get me wrong, I was 2019 when I parted ways with my agent and publisher, I was a wreck. It was awful. I was like, 10 years of my life are gone. But then, so allowing, and I spoke to a friend, an author, Holly Seddon, and she said, take a month off, lick your wounds, and then get back up again. And that's exactly what I did. I took some time off, I licked my wounds, and then I went for it at lightning speed. And that's when Do No Harm came around.
Wow. What a book to come out of, that feeling of, what is this all about? And again, I think you are an inspiration to say, hey, when things don't work, don't worry. I wonder though, given, again, this journey, this book, and I know we shouldn't have favorites or things like that, I'm aware of that, but compared to previous publications, does this book mean something to you that the other books didn't?
That's a really good question. So Do No Harm is my sixth book, and there are two that are really special to me for different reasons. So Do No Harm is very special to me, I think, because it's I knew with the hook it has. So the hook of Do No Harm is a heart surgeon, his child is abducted by an organised crime ring, and they give her an ultimatum: either she kills a patient on the operating table, or that she'll never see her son again. So I knew having that hook. When I came up with the idea for the book, I had that hook, and I knew I had to think of it as a product as well as a labour of love. And I knew that agents would like this product. I knew that publishers would like this product. So I was very excited about it from the very beginning. And writing it was a real escape during the COVID pandemic. I know we're still going through it, but during that height of it.
Yes. Yeah.
And then everything that's happened afterwards, and the place where it's led me, and the team I'm working with now, it's just been, so this will be a very, very special book to me forever and ever. And then my previous book, Night by Night, is it's got a special place in my heart because it is inspired by the true crime of the Grinder killer, and it's all about institutionalized homophobia in the police force. So that's as a gay man and a gay writer, that's got a very special place in my heart, that book. But yeah, Do No Harm is a very special book to me.
Again, you really appreciate, the insight into you as an author and what these things mean, because I know, as a reader, when I then turn the pages, I can, I feel like I know a little bit more about the person who's put these words down, and I think, and I know that viewers really appreciate, to think, so that's who Jack is. That's yeah. Thank you. So the premise of the book, I read that it came out of you undergoing some surgery yourself.
Yes, so I keep getting much up how long ago it was now, but I sat on the idea for a while, and I'll explain why in a minute. But so I had a medical procedure that I'm very lucky wasn't heart surgery. It was something much more minor, but I had to be put under general anaesthetic. And I didn't really think about it, I think out of denial. I just thought, I don't have to think about that. I'll go in, get this over with, and come out the other side. But then as I was being wheeled into the operating theatre, and then I was about to be put under, I suddenly thought to myself, I don't know anyone in this room. I'm just completely trusting them with my welfare. And that panic I had, my heart was racing. I thought, oh my God, I don't actually know these people at all. And I think it finally clicked in my head after years of not thinking about it and living on blind trust, that the only thing allowing this to happen is trust. So, I mean, I was very lucky that the procedure went well. And when I'd come round from the medication in the recovery bed, I started scribbling notes, wondering to myself what could have happened if the surgeon had an ulterior motive, and what happens when you take that element of trust away. Because if that's the only thing keeping this procedure from working, then what's up for grabs? What's going to happen? So yeah, it was a real it got my creative juices flowing like no other book had before.
Again, out of difficulty or troubles, you know, you take these things and you make them into something else. I think you are a bit of a wizard.
Thank you.
You know, so you say, of course, that the surgery you underwent wasn't, you know, heart surgery or anything. So I wonder how much medical research, I don't know if you've had to, I don't know, start taking a medical degree or something to be able to write it. But how, you know, how far did you take the research to be able to create, you know, your main character here?
That's a really good question. I just want to touch on something you said about being a wizard. No, about kind of writing from things that from hard experiences. And I think starting my writing journey from agoraphobia, which was due to a traumatic experience and a lot of anxiety, I think that helped alleviate my things because I was living vicariously through my characters. So I think writing through your fears can actually help you process them. So when something scary happens, you can kind of explore that within yourself and on the page. So I think I love that. So whenever I think, oh, how would I feel about that? What would I do? And I think I love that because the reader gets to ask themselves the same questions. So I think, and fear is such a human emotion in all of us, and we all can relate to it. And I think it's such an amazing thing to play with. When it comes to the research, so I put this book off for a little while. So I had the procedure and then I sat on the idea because I was intimidated by the amount of research I'd have to do. And I thought, well, I'm not a surgeon. I don't know what I'm talking about. This is a step too far. This is too ambitious. But then when I found myself in that crossroads in 2020, I knew this was the idea that was going to get me back on the track and set me off again. So I bit the bullet and started to research, and I realized that I loved it. Because I'm a geek. I love reading, I love learning, and it wasn't hard because I loved it. So it was intense and it was but I loved doing it. So how did I start? So what I wanted to do first is research the surgeon themselves, because I think we kind of put them, and quite rightly put them on a pedestal and almost like godlike figures. But I wanted to know the human behind the scrubs. I wanted to know who they are, how they handle this level of responsibility. I mean, they have someone else's life in their hands every single day. And I just found, because I couldn't do it, because I wouldn't be able to handle that sense of responsibility. To think that their family are waiting for them in the waiting room, hoping they're going to come out, and they've got someone's hopes and dreams behind their closed lids when they're on the operating table. So many things are at stake, and it's all down to their magical hands and the scalpel that they hold. And so I read a lot of autobiographies by surgeons, because it's such I wanted to get inside of them. I wanted to know what they were thinking. I wanted to know what their life was like when they went home, when they were out of the scrubs. How did they go about normal life when they have such an intense responsibility to preserve life, and that oath of first do no harm? So that was a really, really integral to finding out who Dr. Anna Jones is. But then for the medical procedures, there's lots of textbooks, and there was even a textbook that trainee heart surgeons run around with on the ward, and it's got every answer they need. So when I was writing, I just pick it up and skim through like I was running around a ward, really. And then finally, and I don't know how I did this because I'm squeamish, but I watched open heart surgery on YouTube.
Yeah. I mean, I would say for anybody watching, there are moments when it's like, But what I think we were, again, a little bit where, you know, with regards to murder and mayhem, and we'll add medicine to the three ends. I think, though, you know, again, you are very careful that it's not just, you know, gratuitous surgery, shall we say.
Totally, yeah. And I think, and that's actually a really good question when it comes to the research. I think the rule for every writer who's researching a topic is the writer has to know way more than the reader. I had to learn a lot to have the confidence to write about it, but then I only had to share so much, because the reader only needs to know the key elements and a few descriptions along the way. I don't want it to read like a textbook. I want it to read like, because the surgeries always in surgery scenes in the book are very tense, very character driven, and that's the main part of that. So it was just a sprinkling of knowledge that would create it, which would bring the scene to life for the reader and not bog it down.
Definitely, definitely. Now, so you weave the story around three main points of view, and I found it very interesting that they were three female characters. So you've already started talking to us about Anna, the surgeon, but we have Margot, and she's the operating assistant, and we have Rachel, who is the detective. Yeah. I've got so many questions for you. See, I'm sorry. I hope we managed to get through everything. So, first of all, why three? Why these three? And why three women? Because, you know, you could have told this from different perspectives. You know, there could have been someone from the organized crime world, anything like that. So I'll be quiet, Jack, and I'll leave you the floor.
Really good questions. So yeah, so Do No Harm, it's basically, it is that very fast-paced plot premise with that hook of kill a patient to save your child or you'll never see them again. But at the heart of the book, it's actually a story about motherhood. So yeah, we've got Dr. Anna Jones, who's in this terrible predicament. Then we have Margot, her scrub nurse, who due to the cost of living crisis has a lot of debt and is owing money to the wrong people. And has just discovered that she's pregnant. So she is motivated to do anything she can to give a better life to this child than she had growing up and to get out of her situation. Then finally, we have Detective Inspector Rachel Connolly, who's living in the aftermath of losing her child many years before when they went missing and never came back. So although they come from the same experiences of motherhood, they've got very opposing goals and clash a lot along the way. And I loved that they're at different stages of this. So we've got Anna, who's in this terrible predicament. We've got Margot, who's at the beginning of her journey as a mother. And then we've got Rachel, who is mourning the loss of her child. And having those devices at play and different stages of motherhood, putting them together, it was just this cauldron of emotion and cauldron of character. It was just absolutely, so it was an honor to write. And the reason why I write about mothers a lot. I'm not a mother and I'm a man, but I think the bond between mother and child particularly is, or parent and child or guardian and child, is so, I think it's probably the strongest relationship on the planet. And as a writer, it's something that you can explore in so many different ways, and you think, okay, well, what can I throw at this to test this relationship? Because ultimately, in most case scenarios, that is going to prevail, or there's going to be a lot of work to try and protect it. You've got that mother's instinct. And so although I don't have children, and I don't think I will have children, it's just not for me really, but I have that instinctual feeling to protect someone more vulnerable or someone, you know, it's just that it's baked into our DNA, it's instinct. And so I can step into my character's shoes and relate as much as I can as someone without children, to how that might feel. And it's an honor to explore that multifaceted experience of emotion. And I always written from women's points of view. I've written from men as well, but mostly women. I have leading ladies, and I don't know why but I feel more comfortable. I think I was raised by my mum, by a single mum, and my nan. So I've always had very strong female role models. All my best friends have always been women. The person I looked up to the most in popular culture was Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's always been women. I've always idolized women. So I've always felt more comfortable. I think, all writing from a gay man's perspective, because that's how I identify. But again, with mainstream fiction, that is quite difficult to get that into commercial fiction. I've done it before and I loved it, but it's another battle. We've still got a lot of work to do, I think, on that regard. But yeah, so it's just, I've always felt more comfortable. And I think women there's so many emotions that we're allowed to explore. I think often with the men I've written, they're often shaking with pent up emotion that they're not allowed to let out. But I think with women, they're allowed to express it. They're allowed to, there are so many, you can go further, I think. And I think they're more interesting.
I really, what you say about the fact of, it really is those different points of view or perspectives on motherhood, and what as a mother you are willing to do or you feel you should do regardless of where you are at with that experience. Of the three of them, who did you have the most difficulty in nailing down? That sounds terrible, doesn't it? But actually, you know, bringing out that fully fledged character on the page, and why?
Very good question. I'll tell you my favorite as well if you like.
Yes, please do. Yeah.
Well, my favorite is Detective Inspector Rachel Connerty, and then she's actually the one with there's the three main characters, but she's the smaller of the three. But I really enjoyed writing her and exploring her character because there was so much depth to her mourning. There's so much, she was so complicated, and that sadness in her, revealing that emotion and showing who she is behind that hard facade of having to be a detective and be tough was a real honor. So I really enjoyed writing her story. That makes me sound sick, doesn't it? I enjoyed writing about her grief. But no, it was an honor. But I think Dr. Anna Jones was perhaps the most complicated, although I still absolutely loved writing her, and she's such a fascinating character. But going back to that, who are surgeons, because they have to be able to switch something off to do what they do. Because I mean, I would crumble under the pressure of thinking of someone's hopes and dreams are right before me, their family or their friends are waiting. There is just so much riding on the surgeon's shoulders. So there has to be a way to turn that off, and then and that turn off that humanity to work on a task and treat it like a job and nothing more. And so that fascinated me because I wanted then to put Anna in, because then on the other spectrum, we've then got Anna as a mother and how much she adores her son, and that softer side of her. So we've got these two sides that are very different. We've got cold and controlling in the operating theatre, and then we've got loving and doting at home. And how do these meet? How are these the same person? And exploring how they came together and kind of discovering who she really is throughout the book. We see glimpses of each, but which one's going to prevail. I loved that. Was complicated, but I loved writing it.
Yeah, you can sense the labor of love that is found within these pages.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and then there's a part towards the end that we can't talk about, but could you? Anyway, definitely for the readers to find that one out. So now, was this your idea to slash the cover like this?
It wasn't, but I'm so, Simon & Schuster, the amazing designer, he's called Craig, is absolutely so talented, and just blew us all out of the water with this because it's so simple yet so striking.
It is, yeah.
And I think, and I've been really, so with my publisher, I was so lucky. There's been like 2 rounds of proofs, and that was the second with the actual cut. It's just so cool. And then and then we've got the hardbacks with the Waterstones special edition. There's a sprayed edge with the heart monitor line running down it. It's just, they've just knocked it out of the park with this. Amazing.
Very much so. Again, I really appreciate that even before you begin the read, there's an impact. And I think when a book does that, I really love that. Now, at the back of the book, I'm always interested at the acknowledgements that authors bring together, but something that struck me, because you were so generous, you thanked so many people, but there was a group that it stayed with me, and it was the team at Waterstones Colchester. So what do they mean to you? And give them a shout out on here as well.
Thank you so much. So I used to work at Waterstones Colchester. I was there for 3.5 years before the pandemic, and then went into furlough, and then writing Do No Harm. And then I moved to Brighton, but unfortunately couldn't transfer through the company at that time, so I had to leave. And it's such a shame because one, my team were phenomenal, but 2, 50% discount. I miss it so much. That team have seen me go through so many ups and downs. They saw me at my lowest point in my career, and then now they get to see me at my highest point in my career. And it's been such a gift to share that with them. I just did a launch with them this last Thursday, and it was so special to be back there celebrating after I said to the manager, I was like, God, do you remember literally only 2 years ago, I was in the basement having a breakdown, and now I'm here celebrating Do No Harm. So it's just so special. So thank you so much to Waterstones Colchester for being the best team to work with and the best booksellers in the world, particularly John the bitch with the pitch Clark. who has hand sold so many of my books. And then also I want to give a shout out to Waterstones Chelmsford as well, because they and Violet Daniels, who created this amazing window display for Do No Harm. I went and saw that in the week as well, and it blew my mind. I was just so generous.
Beautiful. Do you know, I again, the work of booksellers in bringing us texts like yours, and the artwork that goes into presenting those books. Long may they continue in all that they do. But to return to the book, let's get a little philosophical at this point. There's a notion in it that says, and I like this, the medical symbolism there of the two snakes, but there's two snakes within us, good and evil, working within us, lurking within us. Do you hold with that idea?
I think, very good question. I think for Anna, I think kind of playing with that cold and hard side and that soft mother side, it was exploring that good and evil within her, because she does so much good, but then is she willing to do evil to protect her child? And then how and which snake is going to prevail? I found it fascinating.
Yeah.
In real life, I think it varies from person to person. I think some people are more of that good snake and others are more of the bad. Or then sometimes I think maybe different points in your life. I like to think I'm more of the good snake, but so I think there's always that internal battles within us. We always want to do better. We want to be better people as a society, and as with so many horrible things happening in the world, we always have to remind ourselves to be good. And I mean, I think moral dilemmas are so fun to write, because we're rule takers to the T, and we don't realize how much we are. For instance, we abide by our moral compass, not only because we believe we're good, but also because we know the comeuppance if we don't follow through with that. So we don't, when we're running late for work, we don't mount the pavement in our car and drive off down the street however we want. We wait in traffic and we have to pay the consequences, because we don't do wrong, because otherwise we go to prison. We know that there's something bad. So, but when forced to make that bad decision, which one is going to prevail? And it's kind of exploring that, taking the rules of society away and getting down to the nitty-gritty of that person. As a writer, I love to explore it. And I think reading this book, I think everyone will be able to explore their own good and evil, and which one would prevail in them, and what the decision they'd make in Anna's shoes.
Very, very much so. I mean, it was painful in parts because of that, because you found yourself thinking, of course you must. And then you're thinking, whoa, wait a minute. Why have I said, of course you must? No, because, and then thinking, well, what would you do? I mean, would you, the idea of, no, I refuse. In my profession, I refuse to kill the person here having the surgery when I've taken my oath, first do no harm. I cannot set out to do this, regardless of what might happen to the most important person in the world.
It's the impossible dilemma. And I think that is why it's so powerful and painful at times, because we as readers put ourselves in that position. And if there's no way out but a decision, you'd have to make one. I think I love that readers get to explore that within their own selves. I think because it always fascinates me how we as readers and just people, we read books that are about moral dilemmas and darkness. We watch true crime, we watch scary films, we do so much about, like, why do we enjoy it? We enjoy this stuff. And I researched it because I was so fascinated, and it's actually instinctual for us to enjoy surviving, because it's so important to who we are to survive every day, every second. We actually get satisfaction out of testing those boundaries within us and watching someone survive or someone not survive, and I think, well, I'd do it differently. We actually get satisfaction out of that. So I think that this book is the ultimate endurance test to really get into the nitty-gritty of who we are, what our morals are, and what we would do to survive.
Yeah, and just thinking, you mentioned, there's Margot, she's pregnant, cost of living, things like that, and again, it's so easy to judge, but the times that we live in at the moment, how many people already making really difficult choices around keeping a family together and things like that. Can we, sorry, go ahead, sorry.
No, you just touched on something really important there, and that's so true. It's because within the book as well, with the characters, I didn't just want it to be a story about 3 privileged women who have difficulties, because each of these women have difficulties, but we see how their environments impact them. So with Dr. Anna Jones, she's got a horrible situation on her hands, but she's rich. She lives in a very big house. She's set up very well. Then we have Margot, who is in a very bad situation, but she's got it really bad. Like, she hasn't got anyone to fall back on. She hasn't got wealth to protect her. She hasn't got that sense of privilege or social standing. So we see, so even though theoretically Anna's situation might be more difficult on paper, actually Margot's might be more difficult because she hasn't got the resources to get out. So I think it was also, so not only is there that, but beneath it is kind of this bubbling of politicalness of us looking at our society and how there is privilege within all of us, and how it kind of takes a look at what today's events and things. So that was important to me to add into there.
And lastly, with Rachel, and I really appreciated again that exploration of grief, and and what grief empowers us to do and what grief prevents us from doing, how it influences choices, how long does it stay with us. Honestly, I mean, it's within the pages of this novel, it's like, how much could you pack in, Jack? Seriously. It needed a gentle breathe afterwards and a good cup of tea. To just think, oh wow, what have I just read? And before I approached it, I was slightly flippant, and I'm sorry for that, because when it said about killing an MP on I was thinking, there's a whole list of them that Anna, would you mind?
I'll take this.
But all jokes aside, you give us a real pause for thought in what happens to these these 3 characters. However, you do give us a fourth, another woman who I felt so sorry for, and that is the the very helpful, supportive neighbor, Paula, who sadly it's under her watch that Zach is taken. And again, that sense of I only wanted to help. I only wanted to do the right thing. And even in her, you present us with a character that couldn't. How could she stand up to? Because when we start to realize who is behind this, this gang and what they are willing to do, Paula didn't really stand much of a chance.
She was such a lovely character to write. So I don't mind saying this. So with basically how Detective Inspector Rachel Connerty is led towards Dr. Anna Jones, and how this cat and mouse kind of begins, is that when Zach is taken and Anna is presented with her choice, Paula, who is minding him at the time, doesn't make it. And it's through that crime scene that Detective Rachel Connerty is then led to Dr. Anna Jones, and is perplexed by not knowing where Zach is, but how it's neatly covered up. So that is what sends her off her journey of wanting to find this Dr. Anna Jones's child and prove that he's missing, kind of to fulfill that need, to wishing that she'd saved her own child. So Paula gets caught up in all of that, when really all she wanted to do was help and be considerate and kind of fill that hole in her, because again, she's got a thread of motherhood where her daughter and a grandson they live in Australia on the other side of the world. She doesn't have that relationship where she could have it with Zach, who lived next door. And so I'm evil for that, but I think it showed how much the crime gang meant business, and also what was at stake. Because I think it would have been easy if there wasn't something terrible that had happened when Zach was taken. Dr. Anna Jones might have thought there was a way out, when it's very clear that there isn't a way out and there's only one alternative. You've got to act. So yeah, I had to kill my darling with that one.
yeah, and again, you know, the darkness that sits behind all this, again, looking at society and who, you know, who seems to literally get away with murder, you know, and then presenting this, you know, someone who in society is there to save lives, is also presented with the thing of taking a life. Now it says murder would be easy, getting away with it would be hard. And I just wondered, coming back to the research that you did, thinking of how surgeons, you know, the process of investigation when there seems to be malpractice, is it quite a stringent process then that happens if things are suspected?
I think so. With I looked at it when it came to high profile patients. So because the patient is an MP, I was able to really raise the stakes. So the hospital would have to be particularly stringent in looking through this. And obviously, so let's say if Dr. Anna Jones does what she does, if she does decide to kill the patient to save her child, then she is presented with the task of having to make very well sure that she does a job well enough and hides it. So can she then, not only can she take a life, but how can she cover her tracks? So she has to make it look like it could have been an accident, or maybe it was natural, or maybe it was because of this procedure that something else happened. She has to make it potentially look I'm burying myself a hole here because I'm terrified that I'm saying she's done it. So what if we go back a bit? Do you mind asking me again?
Yeah, we can totally go back. And you mustn't, you know, please, no spoilers or anything like that. but the sense of, you know, for a surgeon to be able to cover up. And I just wondered, when you were researching, you know, did you find that had happened, you know, in real life?
Oh, that's really interesting. I hadn't found situations where it had been done for the right reasons. So like with a moral dilemma, I think there is like surgeons or healthcare providers that have done wrong. And I think so, and when it hits the news, it's always horrifying because they're figures that we trust so much. I mean, there's the nurses that I can't think of their names off the top of my head, but there are nurses throughout history who would kill patients. And there are surgeons who would perform surgeries that they weren't allowed to, or shouldn't have done, or didn't need to. There is that kind of, and there's a quote at the beginning of the book, and I haven't got the book on me, but you might be able to read it out for me. Is it plays with how kind of psychopathy actually is a main trait in surgeons, because they have to have that.
Is it the quote from Pegram and Pierce at the beginning?
Yes.
Yeah. So it says, doctors are subjected to a high level of psychiatric morbidity. It will therefore not be too surprising that some of the traits associated with a psychopathic personality, or perhaps selected out in those who rise to the top of our profession. And that's from the Royal College of Surgeons, September 2015.
So yeah, playing with that trait of does that, and I think it's through my research that it can actually attract people. I'm not, by the way, I'm sure there's loads of lovely surgeons out there, and I'm not saying that all.
Of course, yeah, please, yeah.
I'm not saying all surgeons are psychopaths, but
yeah,
it's interesting how, with some cases, actually it can attract people who have those traits, because it's easier for them to. They haven't got that sense of humanity to turn off. Like for a layman, it might drive a person mad, but with someone who hasn't got that holding them back, kind of, they've got the world's our oyster in the operating theatre.
Yes, to be able to make those necessary decisions without a doubt. Now, Jack, I'm aware of the time, and I know you must have other events and things to be getting ready for. So I just wondered, you said it was a 2-book deal.
Yeah.
this was a standalone. Will it remain a standalone, or will we see anybody appear in the next one?
Very good question. I like to write standalones just because that tends to how the ideas present themselves to me, but also I like the freedom of going somewhere new. However, if Do No Harm sells millions of copies, I'll happily do a second.
Yeah, because I too, I would love to see the detective return.
I really liked writing Rachel, so I wouldn't be, maybe one day she'll come back to me, I think, because I really liked writing her.
Yeah, because I think, you know, having seen her at work in this situation, I think it would be lovely to see her, you know, having moved on from this, and you know what she would be doing. Thank you for your writing.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, pleasure, a pleasure, a pleasure. And thank you for joining me today to discuss Do No Harm. Wish you all the very best with it.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you so much. And thank you for all your amazing questions. I've had a really good time.
It's a pleasure, a pleasure. And I hope that one day we're allowed to do this face to face. Yeah.
I would love it. That would be fantastic.
Wonderful. Okay, well, bye-bye for now. See you soon.
See you later. Bye.